Hi everyone, it's Wednesday, time for Wisdom Wednesday. Hope you all are doing well and are coming out from all the challenges of our recent weather changes, and glad to be back in the saddle this week. We have been spending the last couple of weeks talking about insulin resistance and the stages of insulin resistance, so going from normal metabolism to full outblown type 2 diabetes. And want you to try to understand that this is a continuum. This is not something that just happens overnight. This is something that takes years to develop. And it is our goal here in our practice to try to identify this progression and turn it around. And I think one of the best ways to help us do that is to have some clear understanding of what are all those labs you're doing and how do you interpret them, and how can we possibly use this information to optimize our health. Obviously, listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of webinars regarding this subject, and most recently was just listening to someone talking about the fact that 88% of people in this country, 88% of people in this country are somewhere on this continuum and do not have normal metabolism. That's just incredible. And the comment was, if we could possibly use resources to reverse that trend and have 12% abnormal and 88% normal, the thinking is we really wouldn't even be in this pandemic. Now that's incredible to me, to think that if we had 88% of the people in this country with normal metabolism, therefore less inflammation, therefore a more robust immune system, we possibly could be facing this virus with limited effects. And so, I think that that's one of the reasons I really want to spend a lot of time on this, is that, yes, this has been devastating and it's been a horrific time for all of us. But maybe if we rethink things somewhat and really work toward optimizing the health in this country, these kinds of things may be less problematic and have less impact on so much of all of our lives. We've the last couple of weeks, everybody has just been, I am tired of this, I am sick of this, and I get it. So as we progress then in discussing this subject, let's review real quickly about what we've learned in terms of progression from normal metabolism to insulin resistance to diabetes. And then we'll kind of focus in a little bit on stage 2. So we know that insulin is important for pushing glucose into the cells and particularly into our muscle cells so that we create energy for movement and for activity. When there is too much fuel coming in and the liver has to process all these extra molecules of glucose, then it has to store it in a way that has to be then transported through the body and laid down in the fat. And that's what we begin to see now in stage 2 of this progression. So last week we talked about stage 1, in that there's excessive fuel, but the body is still able to manage it. And the only thing that really goes up in this stage 1 is insulin after a meal. We're requiring more insulin. Our fasting sugars don't really change that much. Our fasting insulin doesn't change that much, but after a meal, or what we call postprandial insulin, begins to go up. At this stage, we really don't feel bad. You're not finding that you're gaining weight. And so there's really no motivation to seek changes. But now as we go from stage 1 to stage 2, what we begin to see is that more and more fuel continues to come in. The liver produces more and more insulin. And so therefore, what is happening now at the muscle cell is that it is becoming resistant to that insulin. So very little glucose gets taken up by the muscle cell because it's already so saturated. And now that glucose is transported to fat and to our fat cells where it's taken up and stored as fat. Now again, not a ton of weight gain necessarily, but what we're seeing is that these fat cells are starting to, because they're still sensitive to insulin, they still can grow and get bigger. But we're seeing that postprandial insulin levels are going higher and higher to get this excessive fuel somewhere where it can be stored. And no longer is it able to go into the muscle and produce glycogen or rapid storage form for sugar. It now is starting to go into the fat cells and maybe starting to see a little bit of weight gain. Triglycerides remain the same, and blood sugars at this stage are still normal. The body still has a place to put that extra fuel so that it's not starting to show up too much yet in our blood work. But this stage 2 is now setting the stage for what will be happening as this type of nutritional eating and less exercise, etc., as this continues in what we see in our folks who are developing insulin resistance and diabetes. There is not enough change and still not a ton of motivation to change in order to improve this. And the thing that's important to know is it's not just about weight, because many people have insulin resistance and really are not overweight. This can happen in many instances because there's genetic issues. People continue to be pretty active and can control some of their weight with this. But the fact that this fuel has to be managed, and the only thing that can help manage excessive carbohydrate and glucose fuel is insulin. And the thing that we need to know about this too is that with higher and higher insulin levels, this begins this domino effect of increasing cortisol, which then continues to then increase formation of sugar in order to help the brain stay healthy with stress and that fight or flight response, which then has a corresponding result of increasing insulin. So our stress load plays an important part in this as well. So part of the things that we talk about not only are nutrition, but trying to manage stress. And this is becoming more and more of a problem right now as we now are starting year 2 of COVID. Right at this point, we can all look back at this time last year and remember, what's going to happen? Are we going to shut down? And sure enough, within a week, we are shut down. And this, occurring last year. So we are entering year 2, and it is hopeful that we are seeing more and more folks vaccinated, and hopefully more and more people will be getting out and more movement. And hopefully you all are understanding what seems to be going on in this dynamic of insulin resistance, but understanding 88% of the American population has some degree of dysfunctional metabolism. Now, it could be mild in many cases, but as we know, it's very significant in many people. But that number needs to change. And as part of the overall health equation as we move forward, I truly believe this needs to be evaluated and looked at. And certainly we have people who are trying to educate folks, but we need to do more. And hopefully we can do it just one person at a time. And that's my goal at this stage, that we just begin the educational process and begin to learn. Hopefully that's helped you a little bit as we progress. We've got just a couple more stages, and then we will review and go back through some of the overall aspects of these 2 dynamic major hormones in the body, insulin and cortisol, and we'll kind of wrap it up in a few weeks with how they work to how we want to bring homeostasis and balance into the body given these two dynamic and powerful hormones in the body. So hopefully you are continuing to learn a little bit, and it's looking beautiful today. We've got some sunshine outside and hopefully entering some lovely spring weather as we move forward. And that will give us also some incentive to get out and move, perhaps. You all have a great week, and we will talk again next week.